everyone, welcome to a sleeping baby version of Tuesday Night Legacy, where I try to record this video with a sleeping baby in the next room. Tonight we have Yorion Death Shadow versus Rakdos Discard. Let's go check out those decks. On the left, we have Pedro playing a Yorion Death Shadow list. Yes, that's right, an 80-card Death Shadow list using Yorion the Sky Nomad as the companion. I guess the Death Shadow players saw D&T doing and said, hey, why can't we take our 80 best cards and make this a deck? So that's exactly what happened. You just basically have 4 sets of all of the best cards. You got your Death Shadows, you got your Baleful Strix, Murktide Regent, adding in the Orcish Bowmaster that if you're playing black, I believe is required in Legacy. It's an extra rule now that was with the printing of this card. You have to play 4 of these if you're playing black. And then it has anything and everything that you'd want as far as control is concerned. Force of Wills, Force of Negations. It even has room for Fatal Push and for Snuff Outs. I was talking a little too loud. The rest of the deck is basically set up with Ponders and Brainstorms, but it also has space for 3 Reanimates in case you get a good Thoughtseize and can grab something really good off of your opponent. Or you can always just reanimate your Death Shadow for 1 damage and then potentially get a 10-10 or even a 12-12 back into play. It's a pretty good deal, and this deck is very resilient since it has a ton of answers that it can come and find. Combating this strategy on the right is myself playing an updated Rakdos Discard list. I took that old one and decided to add some more direct damage with the lightning bolts and of course the printing of the Orcish Bowmaster, and I actually opened a bundle, so you know what, I threw the One Ring in there because why not? This card is incredible, and being colorless can go in literally any deck, so I decided to try it out. Other than that, this deck is a Value Town deck based off of the Waste Not enchantment, and also Sheoldred the Apocalypse being able to cast Burning Inquiry and get massive advantage off of drawing and discarding your opponents, and even yourself. You can gain some life off of that Sheoldred the Apocalypse. And maybe you can also get them to exile some stuff off of the Dothy and win that way. So this deck has a lot of angles going for it, mostly a Value Town deck, probably no better than a B, C tier deck if we're being honest with ourselves. But don't get me wrong, it's still extremely fun to play. Now that we're all caught up with the decks that are going to be playing, let's go ahead and get into those games. Alright, starting off strong with a Thoughtseize out of the discard deck. Who would have thought? So we have Thought here, there's a Daze, a bunch of lands, Baleful Strix, and a Reanimate. Now I think on this long and hard and take the worst card in his hand, and Pedro says that's totally fine. I think my thought process here was I was going to be able to get him to discard some of these other cards soon, and I didn't want him to be able to reanimate his Baleful Strix. Thinking back on it now, almost assuredly I should have taken the Daze. But hey, you know what? Mistakes are always made, and things go on. So, we see Pedro playing that Baleful Strix, getting to draw that card. Getting up Badlands off of the Polluted Delta. Just trying to do some moderate deck thinning here. Of course, for anybody who's not familiar, Baleful Strix is just a 1/1 that has Death Touch and Flying, and it draws a card. It's one of the best early cards in the game. Playing directly into that Daze, the Dothy Voidwalker, having the Reanimate, deciding it's okay to lose 2 life, getting Dothy into play, Pedro throwing down an Orcish Bowmaster, the new superstar of the set, being able to deal 1 damage to anything when it comes into play, and creating a 1/1 Orc with a mass. So every time that there is more amassing, that Orc gets bigger and bigger. Immediately deploying the Lightning Bolt to get rid of the Orcish Bowmaster before it causes any more trouble, as it continues to deal damage for every extra card that is drawn that is not during your draw step. A Dark Ritual into a Sheoldred. Sheoldred the Apocalypse being a 4/5 with Death Touch, believe. I think it's so silly. It always uses the ridiculous printings in Moxfield. We'll do this one. A little bit better there. Yeah, it's got Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever they draw a card, they lose 2 life. Kind of an engine by itself. Pedro deploying nothing, it looks like. At some point, he played another Baleful Strix and is fetching up a Watery Grave, which is a part of the strategy. Since you want to lose more life to be able to play your Death Shadow, this Death Shadow is now a 1/1. Death Shadow, of course, being a 13/13, getting -X for your life total. And a Burning Inquiry. It looks like Pedro forgetting to exile some cards under the Dothy Voidwalker. I guess we're kind of talking about how this is happening. So we, lose the life, gain the life off of the Sheoldred. So Pedro down to 6. I'm up to 17. And now we're doing a random. So for those not familiar, Burning Inquiry says each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 cards at random. Using some dice to make sure that the cards are random. Now these cards should be in exile under the Dothy. Which I do, oh, there we go. Catch just a little bit later. Now this did grow the Death Shadow quite a bit. So I believe it's up to a 7/7 now. A little bit of an issue. And decide to go for a Hymn to Turok. Getting rid of 2 more cards out of Pedro's hands. Just hitting a Wasteland and another land. Not particularly useful since Pedro already has 4 lands on the field. And then I think I'm hellbent. Dropping Pedro down to 3, hoping that I can sneak out this game. Pedro down to 1, and it turns out I can. So we are on to game 2. Island go, mountain go. We see a Baleful Strix into play here. Untapping. Playing that Wasteland. Showing the Wasteland to me, so I'm sure that past Eugene is probably going to get a swamp here, yes. An intelligent choice, since Wasteland says destroy target non-basic. The Valley of Gorgoroth. Moxfield giving us these fancy new versions, sorry about that. But this is Wasteland. And it looks like a Brainstorm. No punishing Orcish Bowmaster here. A cycled Troll of Khazad-dûn. So swamp cycling allows you to go and get a swamp. So you can go and get a Watery Grave or a what's the card? The Underground Sea. Pedro going for the Underground Sea there, or the Watery Grave there. I believe that's a Thoughtseize. Very fancy Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize being able to take the best card out of your player's hand, your opponent's hand. Non-land, of course. Take 1 of 2 Sheoldreds. Sounds good. Pedro not respecting the power of the One Ring. No, I mean he's got a counterspell for my my 4-drop here, so it doesn't really matter. Ooh, there you go. Hymn to Turok. Pedro is going to Brainstorm in response, basically saying, sure, that's fine. I don't even want to waste a counterspell on it, so I'm going to tuck or put my best 2 cards on top of my library, so that whatever I discard isn't a huge deal. So those are going to go there. Oh no, he still did it anyways. Says, I'll choose the cards that go. It's going to be my Dress Down and my Thoughtseize, or Force of Will. Those are the 2 cards that I'm going to randomly discard. So Pedro actually using Brainstorm like it's intended, getting rid of your worst 2 cards and shuffling it away. Orcish Bowmaster immediately exploding with the Lightning Bolt. Pedro turns 2 sideways, has a Wasteland, is about to fire it off, decides to Brainstorm instead. Gonna blow up that Castle Lochthwain I got on the field, so this could potentially generate advantage later in the game if I'm hellbent. But it's not going to be seeing much action here, I don't think. Pedro with all the lands. This deck runs 25 lands out of 80. That seems right. Ooh, look at that. Murktide Regent making his appearance. A full retail value. +5/+5. So this is putting a very real clock on the field. 8 days for my 4-drop of the One Ring, and we are off to game 3 with a concede. Because Murky Boy was going to wrap that up in like 2 turns. A Thoughtseize out of the gate for Pedro is going to take the Orcish Bowmaster, making the hand a little bit more impotent. Putting down Takenuma. Takenuma is kind of a cool one of. It's a legendary land and comes into play untapped, and you can mill yourself for 4 and then return a creature from your graveyard to your hand at instant speed. It's an ability on a land. It's pretty good. Pedro dazing the second Orcish Bowmaster that was ripped off the top. Having to put that Castle Lockthwing into play tapped, since I do not control a swamp. Pedro reanimating one of the Orcish Bowmasters. Very rude. And goes for a Death Shadow. Lightning Bolt's not going to do it here. Death Shadow is currently a 4/4. And trying to Burning Inquiry right now would be a terrible idea, giving Pedro 3 damage to do with what he will. Is this a concede? I don't remember conceding this early. Might just be picking up the hand. Decides to go for a Dark Ritual. And slaps down Sheoldred, sees a Force of Will. Gets another life lost, so the Death Shadow is a 5/5 now. I think there's going to be a lot of thinking here. A pass. And another Murktide Regent. I mean, a different game, but this is going to... This must be setting it up here. Down to 12. Probably going to give it one more draw step. Lightning Bolt. You maybe draw something to deal 5 damage? Land already have 2 bolts in hand? I don't think so. I think this is a concede. And that's going to be the end of that game. Well, there you have it. Turns out Death Shadow with Yorion, extra cards, just as good as it's ever been. And the Rakdos Discard deck kind of did his thing once, and it was fun to see. So Pedro takes it 2-1. Thanks as always for tuning in, and thanks for dealing with the late night edition of dealing with the sleeping baby in the other room. Good news there, he didn't wake up. If this is your first time here, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date on all our cool stuff. And thanks as always to Spellhold Games and Collector Legion for allowing us to record in their play space. We wouldn't exist without you. If you are watching this the day it drops, there is a stream tonight. Come join us at Tuesday Night Legacy on YouTube. And that's going to do it. Until next time, I am Eugene, and this is Tuesday Night Legacy. We'll see you next time.